Hi, biology. Happy Monday. I hope you guys had a good weekend, especially with that nice sun yesterday. So we are going to look at the second section of notes in this unit. It is called Genetic Cause of Change Within a Species, longest title ever. And so here we go. So we're going to take some of those ideas that we talked about in the species notes and apply them more to genetics of organisms. All right. So first off, we need to understand that it is only hereditary variations that can be passed on in a population. It's only those things stored in our genetic material, which but we just need to make sure we really have a grasp on that, okay? So, a long time ago, a scientist called Lamarck thought that if a parent establish something over its lifetime, it could pass that on. Okay. And so that was kind of another theory that was debated around the time of Darwin's natural selection. And he thought that like a giraffe has a long neck because over its life it had been stretching and stretching its neck to reach those high leaves. Okay. And it acquired a slightly longer neck and was able to pass that on to its offspring. Okay. Not true. No matter how well these dogs, these little cute little labs on that slide are trained to sit, stay, whatever, we're never going to be able to pass that on to its offspring. No puppies are born knowing how to sit, unfortunately, right? We have to teach all those things to them. However, things like albinism in that snake below is definitely an inherited variation. That's something in the genetics, and it can pass that allele on to its offspring. And so variations that can change a population over time are those variations that are passed down in our genetic material. All right, and so there's two ways basically that can be done in a sexually reproducing organism. The main way, okay, is genetic recombination. Okay, so that's due to just the random shuffling of the chromosomes in meiosis, right? By crossing over an independent assortment, we can get this huge amount of variation in a population. Okay. And if some sort of new arrangement is incredibly beneficial, that organism is going to be able to be stronger, live longer, reproduce more, attract more mates, all that kind of stuff. And its genetics will be passed on more and become more common in the population. And that's what natural selection is. Okay. So genetic recombination, this almost limitless variety due to meiosis, basically, and the shuffling of our genes, is how we get most variations in sexually reproducing organisms. However, there is another way we get variation, but genetic recombination is definitely the most common. All right. The second is through mutations, which is less common, but it is pretty much the only way asexually reproducing organisms can get variation. And that is just random changes in the DNA sequence. Okay. Mutations, we think bad, but actually mutations could be helpful. They could be harmful, they could be bad, or they could have no effect on the organism at all. And actually, no effect is the most common because most of our DNA actually doesn't even code for genes. And if it's in there, it doesn't really matter. Okay, and so mutations can be just like random things that occur, or it can be caused by different mutagens, like things in the environment that affect the DNA, maybe like UV or different kinds of radiation or chemical toxins, etc. Okay, and so let me just all that up. A term that you need to be familiar with to understand this mutation stuff and variation in general is the gene pool. Okay, so if we have this frog population over here. Okay, and if we make it a gene pool, we're going to make little dots that represent all the alleles that are present in the population. So we have little green dots for green alleles, purple dots for purple alleles, and red dots for red alleles, okay? And those are the colors, in this case, is the alleles that we're representing. So the gene pool is all those color alleles present in that population, okay? Now, let's say they started out all green and purple, and it happened to be a random mutation that caused this red frog. Okay, so mutation has created variation, okay, because it's added something completely new. All right, so we have increased variation through that mutation. And if it is beneficial, natural selection can work to make it more common. If it's not, it will work to make it less common. So let's say that red frog appeared in the population, increasing variation in the gene pool. Well, if these guys live in like a tropical area and their number one predator is birds, will a red frog stand out? Absolutely. So it would be a disadvantage, and they'd swoop down and munch all those red frogs, and we probably wouldn't see them in the population for very long. Okay, so that would be a disadvantage, and it would make it less common. However, let's say there's other frogs in the area that are red, and that means they have a really toxic chemical in their skin, and so all birds avoid red frogs. Well, even if this frog doesn't have those toxins, the birds might still avoid it. It's something called mimicry, and it's definitely used in the animal population. And so that becomes an advantage, and natural selection would work. And what would happen to the allele frequencies of red? They would become more common. And that's actually evolution. When an allele frequency changes in a population, we say that population has evolved. And it basically just meant that natural selection occurred and it became more common in the population. All right. So there are many different types of mutations that can occur. And I'm going to kind of fly through these pretty quickly, and then we'll look for these in different situations in the future. If we just change one base in our 3 billion base pairs, that's called a point mutation. Like A all of a sudden becomes C. Sickle cell anemia is an example of a point mutation. Okay, and this is usually caused by either a deletion or an insertion, which are exactly what they sound like. So if we insert or delete a base, that's a mutation, and that can cause a frame shift, which means that every base after it has moved to the left or right. So the reading frame of the codons that code for the amino acids is all messed up. So every amino acid afterwards is going to be different. This is a big change, and it causes big changes in the phenotype of the organism. The only way that an insertion or deletion wouldn't cause a frame shift if it was how many bases. If you said 3, you are correct, because that just removes one amino acid, right? All right, and the last one is an inversion. And this usually comes from uncoiling the DNA improperly, and it will flip a chunk of DNA. So before we had ACC, and now it's been flipped over and it's CCA. So there's a chunk that will code for different amino acids. All right, so that's all the mutations we're going to talk about. There are other ways to classify them, but this is the biggies. Okay, and so I'm going to stop there for today and wrap up tomorrow. All right, have a great day, and I will talk to you soon.